of kind of the user view of the world, how you might consider presenting that or working with your users. We'll go through all the security setup and how that area of Salesnet works. And then we're really going to focus on the basics of field management, layout management for the detail pages, and then we'll look at the lead section, the specifics around the setup there. And then we'll try to leave a few minutes, kind of wrap up, and if there's additional questions we need to hit, before we go into the next section. Okay, so I'm going to flip over to our slide presentation here. And in our overview, we just want to point out, the user perspective. When they log in and they look at Salesnet, one of the first things you want to understand is the navigation, how to get through the system, which we have a main tab navigation. Global search is very handy, for users when they are trying to understand where their data is located. Does it live in the account tab, the contact tab, the opportunity tab? And then we have setup area where you guys are going to spend, probably 90% of your time when it comes to administration in Salesnet. And then we have Help Center. Okay, so the Help Center has access to the desk, FAQs, documents, some videos, and then our Salesnet support information. Okay. Now, when we look at the Salesnet application, there's a lot of functionality in it, but it really divides out into two main pieces or areas in the system where we perform lead management and then opportunity management. Okay, so lead management, inherently is that area where we want to bring in lists of information, maybe from trade shows. People submit forms. We can feed those automatically into Salesnet from the website. And it's kind of that holding spot where you're trying to figure out, what is this thing going to turn into? And so we can make two decisions out of the lead area, which is convert and convert it into an account, contact, and opportunity, a potential customer to walk through a sales opportunity, or we can reject it out of the system and archive it so that we can start getting some ROI on, well, we had 500 leads and we rejected 400 of them, how many did we convert? Okay, and then once we're in the opportunity management area, okay, this is where we tie into the process, right, the process builder in Salesnet. So this is where we can have multiple processes that can support our sales opportunities. Okay, it can support just a general maybe follow-up opportunity with existing clients. I want to follow up with somebody every 30, 60, 90 days. Maybe we have project management process. We have some people who run service desk through here. So a client calls in and they have a very simple service process. Open a ticket, answer a question. Okay, so this area is where we can really leverage the flexibility and the customization that you can build for your internal processes, but not necessarily just sales. Okay, well, and let me go back, because the important thing too that I didn't highlight here own record, and it can have multiple contacts linked to it. So if you work with an architecture firm and they have 10 architects there, and you might work with different ones of those, for different projects, then you would have all 10 contacts listed here. And then you could have multiple opportunities, okay, that each contact could be involved with. Okay, so they truly are linked together, and you want that information. You want contacts linked to accounts, okay, so that you can get that full reporting across the board, all the way from account, contact, to opportunity. Then we want the users to understand the list page functionality. Okay, this is very powerful. It's almost like a mini reporting engine here on the list page. Okay, so every tab where you have your data, which is leads, accounts, contacts, and opportunities, and even campaigns, okay, it has a listing of the records, in that tab. Okay, and the list pages can be filtered, grouped, sorted. We can filter on multiple columns. If you right-click on a record, you get a direct access menu, is what we call it. So it's a quick menu that shows you all of the functions that you can perform on that record. So the list page almost, like I said, becomes this little mini reporting interface where you can do some of the reporting that you might would have done in the Reports tab. Okay, so a lot of kind of power here at your fingertips, okay, to do it right on the list page without having to dive off into the Reports tab. Okay, so we want the users, once you understand how to work this list page, okay, you understand how to do it for every list page, okay, because the functions are the same as far as having a query and a layout, grouping, filtering, exporting, sorting. Okay, direct access, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that is the ability to just right-click on any record and pretty much any folder, wherever you might see a tree, like in the Documents tab or the Reports tab. You right-click there and you get that quick menu of items that you can perform, you know, for that object. So in a report folder or a tree folder here, we can add a report or we can add a folder. So when we right-click on that, we know what we can do. If we right-click on an opportunity record, we can record activity or we can perform other functions. Okay, and then the one thing we're not showing here is on the main tab. If you right-click, okay, on the main tab, all right, you can set your default landing tab. So up here, when I right-click, I can set, you know, opportunities to be the tab that I land on every time I log in, or I can let Salesnet keep track of it for me. So if I log out and I'm on the Companies tab, then that's where it'll bring me next time I log in. Okay, and your users can also enable or disable the Getting Started tab. So if you'll see, I'm choosing Show Getting Started and unchecking it. They'll have this Getting Started tab where they can download the User 101. It can take them straight to the Support Center to ask questions. You know, so just kind of some resources to help someone get started. Okay. Next, we have the Detail Page functionality. Okay, so we have the list page, okay, or the list layouts, where you see all your records listed. Well, when you drill into a record, obviously you have a detail page, all right? And so the detail page has a detail tab where you have the specific fields of data about that record, but then you have what I would call maybe a sub-tab, you know, a row of tabs on the detail page that show you all the things that are linked to this detailed record. So for more company shipping, you know, I can see the details here. I could go look at the steps or the activity recorded. I could go look at contacts or tasks, appointments. Okay, we have a print to see a one-page summary of all that information on one screen. That can be real handy for users, you know, if they just want to get a quick overview of what's tied to this record. We can send email from here. Okay, so the detail pages, you know, have a bit of functionality, you know, that needs to be designed or developed. All right, so this takes us right into security and access rights. So this is the basics of, you know, the user management, what you can grant to users as far as record access, and then what kind of functions they can perform in Salesnet. Okay, so the user manager is where you're going to configure your users. So in the setup area, you've got the user manager section, and this is where you can add or edit users from here. Okay. As an administrator, you're the only ones that are able to actually edit the users. Okay, your users will be able to see the lists of other users, but they really, it's just maybe for informational purposes, you know, to see phone numbers and email addresses. Okay, but they can't do anything with those records. Okay, and so these screens just walk you through. If you want to add users, you would go to the user manager folder, and you've got an add button there at the top. Okay, when you're adding users, it breaks out into two sections, or when you're editing users, and we'll see this screen a couple of times. In the top section, this is really their profile information, what their login is, their contact information. We have some things about when does their workday start, what time zone they're in. Okay, and these all affect, you know, if they put appointments in or they are updating or editing records, the timestamps they see will be translated for their time zone. You want their profile information to be up to date, because what happens is if we're using external data capture and the system's sending out emails, it's going to leverage, the email address that's in their profile. If you're doing word merges or email merges, it's going to, and you're putting in footers, it's going to use the contact information from their user record. Okay, so we want that information to be up to date, so that we know those functions are going to carry the correct data if you're sending things out. And then the bottom section is really related to what they can do in the system. Okay, can they, manage a process? Can they import records? Okay, can they send emails? Okay, this is, what kind of things, what kind of functions can I perform? All right, so that's what most of this is, except for over on the right, we have some things that say, well, you can't delete any records, okay, or you have read-only privileges. And for our admins, what we typically do when we're starting up a new company or new users, many times we will check off these options for cannot delete, okay, just till the users are comfortable in the system so that they don't, shoot themselves in the foot by accidentally deleting something as they're trying to learn to work in Salesnet. Okay, so this section breaks the user profile down a little further. User login, as long as it's unique within your company, that can be modified for a user. We talked about time zone and locale. The thing that you can specify, and this is only for admins to specify inside of a user record, is their company position. Okay, and so the company position, okay, comes from the company position chart. All right, and we're going to look at that next. The company position chart, all right, is our first layer of security in Salesnet. Okay, it's our first layer of defining what data a user has access to. Okay, so the company position chart looks like a hierarchy, and based on where you are assigned in that hierarchy, it will determine, how much data you have access to. Can you only see your data? Can you see the data, of the people below you, okay, in the chart? So that one setting, okay, has implications on the data that a user has access to. Okay, privilege section is broken out again, and this is where that privilege summary that you can download in your materials window will help. I didn't want to spend time walking through each one of these. A lot of these are going to be self-explanatory, okay, about what it gives you permissions to do. The couple of things I do want to point out is, one, this first administrator checkbox. You guys all have that privilege. An application administrator can manage users, fields, layouts. Okay, you've got that high-level kind of general administrative privilege when that's checked off for you. Okay. The active checkbox, okay, this is what you may find yourself doing many times, is a user logs in incorrectly too many times, and the system automatically deactivates them from a security standpoint. So you would have to come in and check off the active checkbox for that user. Okay, so that's an ongoing administrative task that you may have to perform. Okay. Editing users, pretty obvious. When you go into the user manager, you can click the edit link, and then you basically can edit those two sections. Okay, the only difference that you'll see for yourself as an application administrator is that you can't uncheck that for yourself, and you can't assign a privilege profile for yourself. Okay, so we typically say, it's nice to designate at least 2 administrators, application administrators in the system, so that if for some reason one of you gets locked out or you're unavailable, you've got someone who can come in and kind of help or work with the other seat. Viewing user profiles, everybody can view a user profile by clicking on the name. Okay, pretty clear. And then when you are viewing a user profile, there's 2 pieces of functionality available here at the top. One is you can change the user's password for them. Okay, if somebody needs to have their password reset, they could call into you. You could change the password and say, okay, I'm resetting your password to, test 123. Or they can change their own password. And the other thing that you can do is you can kick off this send password reset. Okay? Sending a password reset email basically sends an email to the email address that's in the user profile, and it provides the user with a link that will walk them through the reset process. Okay, so they click on that link, it takes them to a page where they can validate their company and user info. Then they can request another secure email, so it's a two-step process. Okay, so you don't have to reset it for them. You don't have to tell them what their password is. You can kick them off in this reset process. Okay. The final thing that we want to mention that's related to users and their kind of environment here is the browser settings. Okay, so Salesnet does work, in IE, Chrome, Firefox, and it will work in Safari, but you do have to be aware of the pop-up blockers. So Salesnet does have a number of pop-ups when you click into detailed pages, and so you want to be sure that they're allowing pop-ups, and you also want to set Salesnet up, as a trusted site, okay, inside of their browser. Okay, so that was a quick run through there on just the user management, okay, and we mentioned the assigning someone to a hierarchy position, their company position chart, and we mentioned all the privilege profile options, where you can set, what kind of functionality they can perform. Okay, so now we're going to dive into those two sections and discuss those. Okay, so access rights. When we say access rights, okay, we really think about two different things. One is the record access, so what data can I see, and then one is application access, so what kind of functions can I perform? Okay, what privileges do I have? So we're going to talk about record access first, and like we said, it's kind of a layered implementation. First of all, we set up this company position chart. That's the first setting. A user has to have a position in the position chart to be included in this security model. Next, we can make rules between different positions, and then we can create teams. So we can layer on these security rules that define what data different users can see. Okay? And then the privileges are pretty self-explanatory. It's basically, what functions can you have access to. All right, so when you're considering access, setting up what somebody should see, this slide is just going to give you some of those questions you might be dealing with. Are people working in teams? Does this person need to have access to that person's data? Do people need access to the document library? Do I want to upload documents under a specific user and share that with those people? So these are all the things that you're considering when you're working with record access or application access inside the system. Okay, so when we talk about record access, there's our company position chart, and this is an example of what you would see in your company position chart or in the account that you have access to right now. So when we look at the chart, you can see it's layered. We have a very top node with a number of folders or leaves below it, and so every person needs to be assigned to a position in this chart. Okay, and what the rules are that we're explaining here is that a position at a higher branch, okay, has full access to all the positions below it. Okay, so someone in the executive position would have full access to everybody's data, okay, assigned to the positions in the rest of the chart. They can view it, edit it. If they have delete privileges, they can delete it, okay, and fully work with the data. Positions on the same level do not inherently have access to one another. So that means someone in the Director of Sales and Marketing position, okay, does not have access to the Enterprise Account Manager. Okay, so things on the same level, and I'm sorry, those aren't on the same level. Director of Sales and Marketing is on the same level with Support Administration. People in these two positions do not have access to one another based on this chart, okay, based on this hierarchy chart. And then if we have 10 people assigned to the inside sales position, they don't have access to one another's data either. Okay, they can't share or look at their information. Okay, so there's no data sharing inherently granted, by being in the same position or being on the same level with someone. It's only if you're above a position that you automatically have access to their data. Okay, and it's pretty clear here how to edit it. If you want to add a folder beneath it, you just click the plus sign. If you want to edit one that's already there, you just click the edit link. And so the hierarchy here is not meant to mimic, your org chart necessarily. I mean, sometimes it looks much like it, okay, but it's really meant to lay out, who has access to the most data at the top, and then maybe managers, they have access to just their divisional data, and then people who are reps or individuals, maybe they only have access to their own data. Okay, that's really the thinking that goes into that. Okay, second layer, okay, is our position-to-position rules. Okay, so this basically, the positions that you set up in your chart, this is basically the ability to make rules between those positions. Okay, so if we need, the managers from the West Division to have access to the managers in the East Division, we might make a rule, okay, between those two positions. Okay, and each rule can be broken out. Okay, we don't have to give them full access. In this example, we're just giving access to opportunities. Okay, so we can give rules between positions, and then we can give access on particular items, okay, not across the board. Okay, so just particular things. And we can say, is it just view access? Is it just edit access? Does it include delete? Okay, so it's very specific, very detailed on how you can open up record access between the positions. Now, a common thing that we do for organizations is that we put a rule in place to allow view all access. Okay, so many times companies only want users to be able to edit their own data. Okay, so, but we want them to be able to look up information across the entire organization. So we will allow viewing for every object. Okay, and a rule like that looks like, and I'm going to go into our admin account, and so here you can see our position chart under record access, and then in P2P, a rule that would allow everyone to view everyone else's information, okay, looks like this. Okay, so what we did is we picked the topmost node, okay, and we said all positions below and including vice president has access to all positions below and including vice president. So we're basically giving access to the whole tree for viewing. Okay, our top node here is vice president of sales, and so we've just opened up the entire system for viewing here. Okay, and then we have this rule down on number 2 to kind of emphasize that we don't have to share the whole tree. Okay, we're giving, so let's say we have 5 people in the VP of sales position, and we want them to be able to share one another's data fully. Okay, so we're granting just the position of vice president access to just the position of vice president, and we checked off everything. So that means those 5 VPs can see everything, edit everything, and manage everything of all the VPs. Okay, and this rule does not affect the people below it. Okay, and I would say, if you guys have questions during the session, if you also want to chat them over for us to catch, when I finish up a section, we can do that as well. So however you need to hop in there and ask questions is fine. And then we have teams. Okay, so P2P rules are rules between positions. Teams is basically rules between people or individuals, okay, or users. So we can override, so the rules between positions somewhat overrides or augments the hierarchy, and then Teams does the same thing. Okay, so we can open up similar access to just individuals. And the classic here is, you have an inside salesperson who always works with an outside salesperson, and they need full access to one another's data inside of Salesnet. So we would make a team for them so that they can have access. Okay. The other thing that I'll go ahead and mention about Teams that is maybe not so much related to access is the ability to report on team activity. So we might want to create teams of people just for reporting purposes. Maybe it makes it easier, to query certain things or to report on certain things. So let's say we have our inside sales group, okay, but 5 of the guys really support our east region, our eastern region. Well, we might make a team out of them just so that we can query on, show me all the east regions inside sales activity. Okay, that's a quick query without having to select those people individually. Okay, so think about that. We'll get into reporting in a couple of sessions, but if you're constantly needing to handpick, 5 or 6 people to put them together for a report, you might consider building a team of them so that it's easier to query. Because where we'll see teams start to show up, so if we've set up teams here like cross-selling team and the research one team, what I might be able to do is go look at opportunities and say, show me all the opportunities of a particular team, the cross-selling team. Okay? The other thing you'll notice here is show me all the opportunities of a particular position, the inside sales position. Okay, I'm not getting anything here, but it's not just necessarily about overriding the access rules when we start getting into the reporting world. Maybe it means it's a little bit easier way to, pull our reporting together that we want to see. Okay. All right. Now on to application access. So we talked about record access, which was in the 4th menu here in Setup. Okay, so position chart, P2P rules, and teams. Okay, now what about privilege profiles? Okay, privileges, okay, all those check boxes that you can check off for a user in their user profile, they can also be bundled up, okay, into a package in the privilege profile. So instead of having to check off individual privileges for a user every time you want to set somebody up or change their privilege, you can set up privilege profiles that you can then assign. Okay, so this allows you to say, well, okay, our users now need the ability to send email. You can just check that off in their privilege profile, and those users automatically have that privilege. Same thing, if you want to take one away, you can automatically take it away. Okay, so I know for our folks that are managing, 10s, 20s, hundreds of users, okay, this can be very handy when it's time to roll out a new group or to modify the privileges for those departments. Okay, so we can set up the privilege profiles, we can assign them out, and here you can see the collection, the screen here looks just like, okay, the screen that you see in the user profile. Okay, everything here is the same except for the active checkbox, right? The active checkbox really just applies to that user, whether they've then activated themselves or you have. Okay, that's not considered a functionality privilege, okay, but all the functional privileges are here. And so you can give it a name, you can copy from one that already exists, and then you can save and assign kind of all in one fell swoop. Okay. We don't have slides to talk about the other 3 menus in that area, but I'm just going to quickly review them to make sure you guys know that they're there. Privilege profile, that's what we just looked at. Okay, the ability to set up those individual records. And then we have privilege summary. Okay, this is a very nice way to look across the board and see who has access to what functionality. So every one of those check boxes that you saw on the user profile has a representation here, okay, in this drop-down. So if I want to see everyone that has the import lead privilege, I pick that, and it shows me who's checked off for it. So these are all you guys, okay, user 01 through user 05, okay, and you'll see user 08 doesn't have the ability to import leads. Okay, this is a great way to try to clean things up in your environment, okay, if you want to try to pull things back in, develop privilege profiles, but you don't want to take too many things away, you can go through here and sort through and see, who has the ability to, create and edit and publish queries. Okay, that's one that we typically are kind of restrictive about, all right? And so we'll get into that more. Then we have access cloning. So you guys that, have hundreds of users that you're managing, you can come in here and you can actually, clone the record access that somebody has, okay, to gain the same grants and permissions that you've put in place. And so I'm going to hold off. Everybody's not in the position to cover this piece of it. If we have specific, access cloning and summary questions, we can catch those outside the session. Feel free to send me an email, and we can go over that in your environment. Okay. Now, security options. This one's going to go very quickly. Okay, this is some basic setup pieces, around passwords, password management, those kind of things. So we have a few items here. We've listed them on this third menu under security configuration. So right under company configuration, we have the ability to set the login attempts. So if a user logs in incorrectly too many times, they get locked out. The thing that we always want you to remember is that if you've allowed your users to use the Excel add-in, Word add-in, the APIs, okay, if they change their password, they have to go change their password in all those add-ins, okay? Or if they log into mobile, mobile uses the same password. So those add-ins, if left set up with the old password, can actually invalidate their account for them, unfortunately. Then we have the ability to force a mass, password change, okay? And I know this can sometimes be a security, internal security issue. Something happens there and you want to force a password change across the board. Okay, you've got the ability to do that. You can set the password expiration time frame up to 365 days, and then you can set the complexity level. So you can require letters, numbers, uppercase, etc. when they're setting up their passwords, and you can specify how long it has to be. Okay. And then finally, there are a couple of items here on the tree under security configuration for restrict access by IP. That basically means you would restrict people being able to log into Salesnet unless they were behind a certain IP address. So they have to be sitting on your internal network, to access their Salesnet. We very rarely have people, invoke that because it basically restricts people who are working from home or traveling. Okay, that would cause a problem. And then you have the ability to set a custom login page. Okay, this is called remote login and redirect. So instead of using the Salesnet login page, you could have your own custom login page for your organization where people would go there to log in. And sometimes we have companies implement that so that they can put their own messaging up for their users, or they can brand, the entire kind of login experience there. If you're interested in that, I would say please contact me, outside the session, and we can go over the specifics. But you'll see there's a link here to download the documentation that goes along with that. Okay. Custom fields and detail layouts. So this will bring us into the basics of how to manage a field, the different types of fields that are available to us, and managing layouts. So a couple of overview notes before we get into it. We have the ability to put unlimited custom fields into all of the areas: lead account, contact opportunity, and campaign. Okay, and each one of those areas also comes with a set of built-in fields. You can designate access to a field, okay, for viewing, creating, editing, all right, so that, you know, the classic scenario is you have a back office person who's going to fill in the account number, and you only want them to be able to edit it. Everybody else can view it. Okay, so we can set up some very specific rules, okay, around accessing a field of a data field, and if it's a pick list, even the pick list options within that field. Okay, once you set up a field in Salesnet, you do have to add it to a detail layout in order for users to use it. Okay, so we're going to go through this step-by-step process here on the correct way, or how to set up a field, give access to it, and make it available. Okay, we similarly can have an unlimited number of detail layouts. Okay, and just like a field, okay, the layout has to have its usage specified. Who can view it? Who can create it? Okay, so you can create different layouts for different divisions, okay, or for different purposes. Okay, they can show different sets of data. All right, so we're now entering the area where almost everything that you're going to set up in Salesnet is going to require that the usage be set for it. Who can use it? How can they use it? View, create, edit. And sometimes they're going to need to be made active. Okay, we'll start seeing, you know, if you set it up, it has to be activated. It can't be inactive. Okay, so keep that in mind as you start configuring Salesnet for your company. Okay, you always have to specify who can use the thing that you just set up, and sometimes you have to check and make sure it's active. Okay, so custom fields, all right, are created in each one of our main data areas: leads, accounts, contacts, opportunities, and campaigns. Okay, so when you're in setup and you open up the menu for one of these data areas, okay, the first item on the list there is field management. Okay, so if I want to set up an account field, I do it in the account area. If I want to set up a contact field, I do it in the contact area. Okay, so you have to first decide, okay, what kind of data am I storing? Okay, does that piece of data go along with the account record or an opportunity record? And then you have to go configure the field in that area. Okay, so how do we add a custom field? Pretty simple. Okay, you basically get a short wizard that walks you through setting the field up. When you go into field management, you're going to see an add button. Okay, when you click the add button, you get to name the field. Okay, and that's where it'll show up with that name on all the layouts going forward. You get to pick the type of data that you're going to store in that field, and that just means is it a text field? Is it a number field? Is it going to be a link, you know, out to another system or another page somewhere? Okay, so you get to set the type of data, currency. You can designate a description for that field. Okay, and that description gets used as a tooltip. Okay, so I'll go into Salesnet and show you where that description pops up for your users. Okay, but that's basically a little bit of information, you know, that you can share with them about what that field is or what it means. Okay, and then we can designate whether it's available for querying, okay, on the list page, this checkbox here. We'll go over that. And then you can set max length. Okay, so if you're setting up a field and you want it to be 5 characters and you want them to fill in an ID, you know, you can chop it off at 5, you know, so that they can't put in like a 10-digit number or something. Okay, so you have some control there, and then some formatting. So you can set up some URL fields or some additional email fields. Okay, so that's the first screen of the wizard. And then the second screen is how do you want them to enter the data? Okay, do you want it to be a pick list or a drop down, okay, where they can just pick items? And then, or do you want them to key it in? So they're going to hand type it. Okay, so we'll go over some of the specifics here. Okay, so the wizard kind of guides you through, you know, the options that you need to pick for each field. Okay, so the first part is going through the wizard and setting up the field. Okay, the second part, okay, that you cannot forget, or your users are going to call and go, I thought you were going to add a field, I don't see it. The second part that you have to do is you have to grant access on that field. Okay, and what you do is you just click on the link, and you can see here in this screenshot there's one that says 0 grants. That means no user in the system has access to that field right now. When I click on the 0 grants, okay, that's going to bring me to a page where I can add a grant or I can add access. We kind of use those interchangeably in Salesnet, granting access or usage. And when you add access, you're going to get to pick who can access that field, and you can say, can they view it, can they create a record with it, and can they edit that field ongoing. Okay, so everybody doesn't have to have access to everything, and every field doesn't have to be editable. Okay, but what I would say is, as a kind of a rule of thumb, a getting started rule of thumb, you know, unless you have a business requirement that says only these people can see that field or only those people can edit that field, we recommend that you give full access, okay, to the field to everybody. Okay, because as you start layering in functionality, so you create a field, you grant access, you put the field on the layout, you grant access to the layout, and as you start doing those things, if someone raises their hand and says, I have a problem, I can't seem to edit that field, okay, you'll have to start walking your way back through things. And the most basic implementation is to just grant full access to these fields. Okay? So once you grant full access to the field, okay, then all you have to do is add it to the layout. Okay, that would be your third step. Okay, but this screen, and no matter how long you've been using Salesnet or administering Salesnet, at some point you forget to grant access, and you've said, hey, everybody, go check out the so-and-so, it's been added, and somebody's going to say, I can't see it. If they say, I can't see it, I don't see that, then it typically means you haven't granted your access. The next few slides will be very handy for you after the session so that you can come back through and get some tips and some more detail on things. But this basically breaks down a description for each type of data field that you can set up. So a string field, okay, you can put characters and symbols, and it gives you an example of each type of field. Okay, so this will be very helpful, for you going forward. And then finally, the data type that you can set up that maybe is not very clear or apparent is this integration link. Okay, so you can set up what we call an I-link, integration link, to launch any other kind of web application or an an intranet site. Okay, so if you want to launch, custom reports from another system and you want to pass along the Salesnet account ID because that other system, we've tied the two together, then you could set up an I-link to launch a business objects report or a data warehousing report, and you could pass along information, to feed that report. Okay, so we can do some really cool things, with the I-link functionality, okay, to tie together systems kind of at the web browser level, okay. And this, again, this is one of those things, if that kind of sparks an interest for you, and you're like, oh, I could launch, the quoting system, or I could launch this other application we use, or our data warehousing. Feel free to, we can talk after this, or you can ask me about this functionality, and we can set up samples for you, that you can play with. What you'll see if you'll log into the admin system is we've set up a couple of things like for Facebook and LinkedIn, okay, and I'll go over some of those as we get further into the training. Data entry methods, so these are all the different options for entering data. Key in, hand type, strict pick list is basically a drop down. And then we have something in the system called a loose pick list, and I recommend that you guys do not use a loose pick list. Like, there are very few reasons to implement one of those. And basically a loose pick list gives the users the ability to hand enter a value, okay, if their value is not in the list. Okay, and it looks like, or it seems that it's actually letting them enter the value into the list itself, but it's not. Okay, it's letting them basically hand type a value for that particular record. And so it pretty much turns your drop-down into a key-in field. And if you were going to depend on that drop-down for reporting purposes, then you basically have lost the ability to have reliable, data from that drop-down. The plan is to retire that because it really causes more problems than it causes help. And so what I would say is if you're here today and you find yourself with loose pick lists in your account and you don't want them and it's caused you some reporting problems, again, shoot me a note. We can help you get those cleaned up. All right, so and try to get you back to a strict pick list environment. But going forward, as you create drop-downs and pick lists, I would not recommend using one. Okay. Cascading pick list. Okay, this basically gives you the ability to give a way to nest values. So, here if somebody picks the industry for retail, then we can give them, a short list of subcategories. So sporting goods, running apparel. And so what it may look like if I go into one of our account records, okay, and we look at one of our strict pick lists here, this materials list, you can see the ... That means there's something below that option. And so I can pick admin. And then under admin, I could stop with PowerPoint deck, or I could go on into agenda. And then in the agenda, I could pick the 3-day agenda. The thing I would, so it's a, sorry, let me fill this in. The thing I would say about the cascading pick list is it does make a nice picking environment for your users. But what I want you to see here is that this is how the data is stored and displayed. Okay, so if you're wanting to output that onto a report or something, that is how that's going to appear. All right, and that is how you have to filter for it, in a report. So it is nice, from a user's experience, but you just have to make sure that that data fits what you may want to do with it, in a reporting environment. Okay, and then we have calculated fields. Okay, so calculated fields are basically the ability to use numbers and dates, okay, to perform calculations. So if I want to track different revenue streams in an opportunity, let's say I have service and I have licensing and I have hardware, I could put those $3 amounts in there and I could create a calculated field that adds them all together. Okay, so I could get a grand total, for my opportunity value. Okay, and so when you set up your calculated field, you'll get a little interface where you can then choose the other fields to include in the calculation. And you can do basic things, math functions on those calculations. And then we have some examples here out to the right. So not just adding these up, but you can see we can do some differentials on things. And also we're looking at, total numbers and divide probability. We can use percentages as well. Okay, so our tips for custom fields. Each field has a data type. Keep in mind that if you set up a field and you didn't pick the right data type, you pretty much have to delete it and re-add it. Okay, there is a certain point, if you set it up and you're a couple of days into it and people have been using it, we might be able to change it for you behind the scenes. You can contact support. But if you go too far down the road, the data in it may not allow us to change the data type. So please, pick that one carefully up front. The other thing about the way that they enter the data, whether it's a drop-down or a key-in, keep in mind if you set up a pick list and then you decide you actually think they should just key it in, you can change that. So you can go from something restrictive to something less restrictive. But you can't go the other way around. If you set a field up as a key-in field, but then you change your mind and you want it to be a drop-down, that's a do-over. You would have to create a new field, and specify it as a pick list or a drop-down. Okay, we always remind, don't forget the access. Okay, and again, we'll kind of chant that throughout training, is don't forget to grant the access. That's important. So we, again, recommend that you set full view, okay? And we also have a little shortcut here. So if you're kind of engaging here on setting up a large number of fields to get yourself configured. What you can do when you look at your fields is you can find one that already has a grant on it. So if I'm looking at my list of account fields here, I can say, okay, that already has a grant on it, and if I go look at it, it's for all position teams users to use that field fully. I can copy that grant, okay, to every other field that I set up, okay, and I can say overwrite. Okay, so in that way, you don't have to go to every new field, okay, and grant the access individually. I can click the overwrite button, all right, and overwrite everything all at once with that grant. Okay, so there's a little time saver tip if you're about to, embark on a big configuration task here. Making the field box width appropriate may be helpful in kind of controlling or validating some data. And then the other thing to remember about calculated fields, okay, is a calculated field, all right, is updated, or the calculation is triggered whenever one of the pieces of the calculation is updated. Okay, so if somebody goes in and changes the revenue streams, on an opportunity, and they save the record, the calculation is run and it's updated right at that moment. Okay, so then if you run reports, okay, the calculations aren't firing, to get you the latest and greatest calculation. It's just pulling the value that was updated whenever the data was updated. Okay, so calculations are updated whenever, any piece of the data is updated. Okay. The basic setup is the ability to put the fields onto the detail layouts. Okay, so this is, the drill downs that you get whenever you click on a record or launch view or edit. You're basically working in a detail layout. Okay, and you can have multiple detail layouts. And what we're showing here in this screenshot is every section, right, every data section has a detail layout editor that goes with it. So if I set up fields in the account area, then I can go into the detail layout editor and pull up a detail layout, and I can edit it, add them, take them off, and work with it from there. Okay. So the slides that we show here, we basically are giving you a summary of every little piece of functionality there for editing a layout. All right, I'm going to go in and go over each one of these kind of live so that you can see how it works. Okay, but these slides, if you want to have this up on a different screen or look through this as we're going through the layout editor, these slides basically give you that detailed, instruction of what each piece is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump live, into Salesnet after we look at these how do you kind of get started PowerPoints. So when we're in the layout editor, each one of you is going to have at least one layout, okay, even if you're starting new. Okay, so you can go in and you can just edit a layout that's already there, okay, or you can add one. All right, you can also, when you're adding, you can also copy from an existing layout if you want a starting point. The key here, this is our first item that we're going to talk about that can be active. Okay, it can be active or under construction. So if you build a layout and you want someone to be able to use it, okay, this is like the 1-2 punch here. It's got to be active and it has to have a grant on it. Okay, so again, don't forget your grant access. You're probably going to hear me say that like 100 times. So when we set up the layout, you can add, edit. Obviously, we give it a name. If you want someone to use it, it has to be active. And then kind of the second step to that is putting your usage on. Okay, so this just shows you once you launch into edit mode, okay, you've got the ability to add fields. You've got that add field link. And this is showing you a concept of, just you can multi-select fields, and put them onto the layout. Okay, but I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, and then one of the key things to remember, okay, is once you put a field on a detail layout, each field then has its own set of attributes or properties that you can specify. Okay, so even though this next step notes field, I might have given everybody full access to it, I could on this layout make it view only. Okay, so I can add like a little bit of an override here, because on this layout I know that nobody uses that for editing, and I don't want anybody to edit in that case, and so I want it to be view only. Or I can make it required. I can make it wider, or I can make it taller. Okay, so each field, once you put it onto the detail layout, can have special things designated about it, and you can kind of move it around the page and organize it, against the other fields there. Okay, and then here we're showing the grant access. Okay, this looks just like the grant access for a field. Okay, when you click grant access and then you add one to it, you can see this layout has view, create, edit set for it for all users. Okay, and it's a picker. And so this is another concept that we need to get used to over the coming sessions, is granting access based on position, team, or user. Okay, so I can make this field available, I could make an inside sales layout. And so I could give them full access just to the inside sales people. Okay, so somebody in outside sales would never even know that layout existed. Okay, but we call this being able to grant things or share things via position, team, or user. That's called the PTU. Okay, we call that share it via the PTU, position, team, user. Okay, so that's you're going to see this screen as we go forward over and over and over again. Okay, because that's how we present, being able to share that access. Okay, so let's go in live and let's look at editing the layouts. I think I've got one. Okay. Okay, so let's collapse our menu, and what I'm going to do is right-click on the top left for setup and just say collapse all. Okay, and so we have our menuing here dedicated to each one of our data areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up and work on contacts now. Okay, so again, field management right at the top. I can see all the fields I have access to. You'll even see that checkbox we were just talking about. It's shown on the list page, so if I wanted to change that about a field, I could. I can see I have a number of fields out here without any grants on them. Okay, I could go in and straighten those up if I wanted to at this point. But now I want to go to the detail layout editor. Okay, and so here in contacts, I have two layouts. Okay, if I just look across this, I can see they're both active, and I can see one has grants and one does not. Okay, so I know immediately that nobody in the system would be able to use Club Quarters because it has 0 grants. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's go ahead and allow grants on this layout. When I click on it, nothing's here, and you get a little, look at these instruction boxes. You see these from time to time in these sections to kind of give you some, tips and tricks. But I'm just going to click the Add button to add the grant. I want everybody to be able to use it, and I want all users to use it. Okay. If I wanted to, I could just specify it for a given position. I could even pick that position and say TED Salesnet. I can do any kind of combination of PTU in order to grant access to this layout. But let's just go for all users and click Save. And so we'll see View, Create, Edit for all users. Now when I go back and click on my Detail Layout Editor, I can see I have grants in place now for both layouts. So how does this present itself? Okay, what this means is when a person goes to a contact record, okay, and I'm going to click on Alice Jackson, when I launched her detail page, okay, contact detail, I have 2 layouts available to me, 2 detail layouts. Club Quarters, which looks very different from the best practice layout. Okay, so this is where you see the layouts pop up. Okay, so if somebody has access to more than one layout, they can switch between them via this drop-down. Okay, but then, you know, if I had only been granted access to one layout, I wouldn't even see this as an option. Okay, all I would know is that I've launched the detail page and this is what I have access to. Okay, so let's go back and let's look at the components of the layout. Okay, if I look at the best practice layout, okay, I'm just going to start from the top and go left to right explaining what we have here. Okay, so first of all, we have name and status, and if I want to edit those two things, I click the edit link. Okay, and I can change the name here if I want to. I can give it a description, and I can change the status to under construction, which would make it not available, okay, in the system. Okay, this is also, if you think about it as an administrator, this is kind of helpful for you if you're trying to launch new functionality or if you're trying to modify things. You can have a layout off to the side where you're working on things and getting it ready, and it's inactive or under construction until you're ready to launch it. Okay, so people aren't impacted by, you know, what you've done or what you're working on. They can kind of go about their daily, you know, activity in the system without being interrupted. Okay, so then if we go left to right, we have a few buttons here. Layout usage, okay, that's the same thing as clicking on that grants link, okay, from the list page. Okay, so that's the same thing as clicking here, okay, to grant usage. Then we have test layout, and this can kind of be handy if you're working on a layout and you're not sure how it's going to look to a particular user. You can pick that user and you can say, well, I want to see what it looks like for them for editing. Okay, and I can look and see, you know, oh, okay, yeah, they've got access to everything. You know, because if I hadn't granted a field correctly, then a field might not be showing up here. And then we have copy layout. So if I want to start from an existing layout, I just open it up, click copy layout, and it automatically creates a copy for me. And you guys feel free to do that. I mean, we have a number of them already kind of laying out there. Either you can grab one to edit or you can copy one and make your own. Okay, and then we have some links to the right. Okay, the first one is add field box. Each one of these large boxes on the screen, that's a field box. Okay, it contains a grouping of fields. Okay, and so each field box has a name. And so if I add a field box, it pops up. I can give it a name. And I can specify what order it shows up in. So if I put it into position 5, it's going to make it the 5th field box on the page. But just for, you know, fun here, I'm going to make it position 1. Okay, and it's here at the top. Oh, sorry, I double-clicked there. Okay. The other thing, if you'll notice, so I called it added info. If I click on that, I can change that name again, and I can also give it a description. Okay, this is where additional info will be placed. Okay, so if someone's in edit mode, if they hover over that name, they're going to get a tooltip. Okay, so this is another place where we have tooltip functionality, you know, coming into play. Okay, now you'll see in each field box I have another set of links available to me. I can add fields to this field box. I can change the display order of the fields. I can change the tabbing order of fields in a field box, or I can delete the entire field box. Okay. Now, before we dive into editing or working in a field box, let's finish out these two items here. Toggle grid. Okay, toggle grid is going to become your best friend here because it lets you visually see how the fields are organized on the page. So when I toggled the grid, you'll notice the columns and rows were highlighted with, they're outlined here. But you can see we have 8 columns across. Okay, so when we're positioning fields, we basically have 8 slots to work in. Okay, and so I can, and it goes left to right. All right, and if I look at the grid here and you see all my fields in this field box, you'll notice there are 2 numbers beside every field name. Okay, every field name has two numbers. The first number is the order of the field in the field box going left to right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you get the picture. The second number, okay, is the tab order. So I can specify different tabbing, and you'll see here, so if you started here, you could fill in the first name. If you hit tab, it would go to the second one. If you hit tab again, we're all kind of out of whack because we've been playing with this layout. Here's your third one. Okay, the fourth one, where'd it go? It's got to be somewhere on here. Here, department division, it's right down here. So you can see my tab order is all kind of crazy. Okay, but you'll notice here I can set my tab order. So I can either, for this field box, I can reset the order to match the display, or I can one by one start moving these guys around. You know, I can say, okay, I want them to be able to tab down and then start up here and tab down. So I could start working my tab order here. And now you'll see my tab order goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So once you add fields to a field box, you're basically playing the game of getting the order of the fields that you want and then setting the tab order. Okay, so let's add some fields to this new field box that I've put in place. So when I click the Add Fields link, it's only going to give me the fields that are not already in use. Okay, so if the field is already being used somewhere else in the field box, then I won't see it here. So I'm just going to pick, you know, these random fields. And I can pick them all and say Add to Field Box. And it's just going to put them into the field box in that order listed down the left-hand side of the page. Okay, and the label is to the left. Okay, so if I look at this, okay, I can see that for this field, Home Mobile, and I just clicked on the link, I can make it required, I can make it view only. I can switch it to a different field box. I can make it not be the first field. I can make it be the 5th field, let's say. I can control whether the field label is on the left or if it shows up above the field. And I'm going to pick above because I want you to see the difference. But typically we recommend fields to the left. It does seem to be generally easier to read. Okay, so label placement, we're going to make this one above. Leading columns, I really personally don't care for leading columns. Okay, I would not use this if I didn't have to. What that says is it's going to put empty spaces ahead of this field so that you can make it slide to the right. And so I'm going to pick 2 just so you can see it. I can control the field width, and what this basically means is I can specify how many of these columns, you know, the 1 through 8 that we have across the top of the page here. I can say, well, you know what, I want that column to be 3 blocks wide. I want that field to be 3 blocks wide, you know, because it's typically a longer value, and I want people to be able to type into it easily. And I can make the height be taller. Okay, so if you have a notes field in there, you might want to make it multiple rows tall so that it's easier to type into. And then I can designate whether it starts a new line or not. So you'll see here, every one of these fields starts a new line. Okay, it's been returned down to the next line. Well, if I uncheck this box, okay, what I'm expecting is Home Mobile. Okay, I'm moving it to position 5, and it's going to be to the right of Home Other. Right? I'm just trying to lay out what we're doing here. So I'm specifying that this field is going to go to the 5th position instead, and I'm taking away the return character so that it's going to be pulled up onto this same line. Here I can provide a different default value than what I set up in field management. So here we've got another override scenario. So I maybe had set up a field with a default value of 10, but on this layout I could make it be 5. And I could either override or append, okay, to the field description as well. Okay, so another scenario here where we set something up in field management, but we can override it or tweak it here when we actually put it on this layout. And then if I put this field on a second layout, I could give it all different default values and descriptions. Okay, so once you put the field on the layout, that opens up a whole nother little avenue of settings that you can specify for that field. All right, and I'm going to make this guy required. So we're kind of just messing him up all over the place, and I'm going to go ahead and put in a default value, and I'll give it an overriding tooltip. Not tooltip, tooltip. Okay. Now I'm going to save. It's going to be all messed up. So, home mobile moved to position 5. I took away the display on new line, so it brought it up to this line, and I put those 2 leading spaces in. Okay, so it's tabbed over essentially 2 blocks. I gave it a default value, I made it required, and I gave it a tooltip, on this layout. Okay, so you do have to, if you want to specify a given layout, okay, there is no drag and drop. We'd love it if we had some drag and drop to do this. We're just not there yet in the admin area. But if you want to set the display order kind of what I would say in mass, like I say, okay, I want to move website up, I want to move phone up, I want to move pager up. I can do some things very quickly to at least get it into the correct order. But then if I want to pull things up, to a different line, I have to click on the field, take off the checkbox, and save. Okay. If I want to widen, how many blocks this field's going to be widened to, I have to click on that and specify it. Okay. The other tip and trick I would say, for providing information to your users is that you can, put quite a bit of information into the, enter phone as XXX, dot XXX. I mean, you can put quite a bit of detail kind of across this bar for the field boxes. So if you felt like you needed more instruction for your users, you could use more field boxes, and put just a few fields in it that apply, and you could put more instruction in here. So if you're kind of struggling with some of that and want to, do something a little more informative, you do have the option. Okay, configuring leads inside of Salesnet. There are a couple of components, obviously fields and layouts, that are common across the board, but we're really going to focus on the specifics in the leads area that are different from the other areas of the system. So what is a lead? Okay, we talked about lead management up front, that's really that area where we're bringing in information that has potential, right, but we're not sure what it's going to be yet. Right, so from the leads area, there's really 2 main, there's a decision that you can go 2 directions. One is conversion, like there's some potential there, and we're going to convert it over to the other side of the house so that we can leverage process, okay, in the opportunity area, or we're going to reject it, and that means we're going to archive it, and we're going to just hold it there for historical reporting purposes, performance purposes. Then we have lead ownership. There's some difference here in the lead area in that a lead does not have to be owned by a user. Okay, it can be owned by a queue. Okay, and a queue is basically buckets that you set up to somewhat mimic a user. So if I import leads from a trade show, I could set up, trade show 2014 queue. I could import the leads into that queue, and then I can do a number of things to assign them to people. I can assign them, 10 at a time out to a specific user to use. I can give my users access to the queue so that they can come in and just work items out of the queue themselves. Or I can designate that, our sales manager has access to the queue, and he's going to be the one, assigning things from the queue area. Okay. Then we have queue administrators, and that's really the scenario where an administrator, are you guys having a hard time hearing me? I just got a note, Gina said it's kind of cutting out. Is anybody else having any issue?
No, I'm listening perfectly.
Everybody's okay?
No problems here.
Okay. Sorry, Gina. It sounds like it might be on your end. Okay. So the queue administrator then is that person like the sales manager. So you make them an administrator of the queue so that they can manage the records that have been imported or that live there. Okay, so they would be responsible for the queue at that point. Okay, the lead setup area, so we're just giving you a screenshot of the options. You know, everything past detail layout editor is truly specific to the lead area. Okay, so we have stages and stage sets, we have mapping for fields, duplicate matching, and so we're going to go through each one of these, but we're breaking them out because they kind of go together. Some of these go together to accomplish conversion in particular. So when we have setup activities in the lead area, one of the things that we have to do is actually enable the leads tab. Okay, so leads is not necessarily even turned on for your company. Okay, that's something that you do have to enable along with campaigns if you want to use campaigns. Next, we need to look at our fields, you know, our access, our layouts. Then we need to look at our stages. Okay, and stages are basically very simplified, almost statuses that you might see in a process. Okay, but Leads does not leverage the process engine. Okay, stages are basically just simple drop-downs. Okay, where you can say, okay, this lead is in this stage. We'll go over that. And then we have a number of items in the menu that are all dedicated towards the conversion of a lead. Okay, so there's all these settings about converting a record. So one of the things is fields. Okay, if we have fields in the lead area, we want to be sure that they get passed over to the account and contact records, for example. So we want to make sure we have that mapping in place. If we're converting accounts and contacts, we want to make sure that we're finding duplicates wherever possible. And so you can specify which fields, okay, that the system looks at to prevent duplicate records getting created in the account contact opportunity area. We can require certain ownership or field values, okay, when we create opportunity records. We can preset that. And then we can specify where any notes or activity gets transferred. So if somebody attached a document to the lead and they convert it, we can say we'll always attach that to the opportunity record. Okay. And then we have queues. Okay, queues is probably one of the most simple, and we'll cover that at the end. And then ongoing, what we find ourselves doing is maybe importing leads, or we're setting up external data captures to drop leads into the lead area, and maybe we're managing our lead queues. Okay, so this little activity here, you know, the initial setting up conversion and things, that's kind of a one-time thing. Okay, once you have that in place, it's really just managing your queues, you know, and the records that you have. Okay, so where do we enable the module? This one's pretty easy. It's in the Appearance and Application Customization menu, and you'll see application modules highlighted. Basically, you just go here and check off the leads checkbox. Okay. Built-in fields, we have 25 built-in fields, okay, and an unlimited number of custom fields are allowed. Okay, this is very, again, similar to the other areas of the system. You manage layouts in the same way. Okay, we have the layout usage buttons across the top. We can add field boxes, add fields. This is all, you know, exactly the same. And now we get into stages. Okay, and so I think the naming here can be a little difficult to understand straight away, but I want to try to explain it so that it makes sense. Okay, so a stage, okay, just think of it as its status. Right? It's the state of the lead, the status of the lead, okay? And every stage, okay, that you set up All right, basically it has two things to specify about it. So it has to be a type of stage. So there's three categories. It can be working, converted, or rejected. Okay, so we can have working stages. So if you want to specify custom stages beyond the name working, you can have, email. It's in the emailing stage. It's in the phone call stage. It's in the visit in person stage, and those would all be stages that are of type, a working stage. Then you can have different conversion stages. So if you want to specify, well, I'm converting this because I got in touch with the owner of the business, or I'm converting this because they've confirmed they have a budget. You can set up custom conversion stages, and you would say this is a stage that's a converted stage. Same thing with rejected, and we're showing an example. We have a very generic rejected stage, but then we have one specific, so somebody could say, it's rejected because they're out of business, and that still means rejected. Okay, so when we look at, we can look at these categories, and we always have these same categories, working, converted, rejected, but our custom names that we set up, okay, they can be whatever we want them to be, but we just have to assign them to one of these categories. And then obviously they can be active or inactive, okay? Now, that's the stage records, okay? That's very simple. Now, you can have sets of stages, okay? So we might have a set of stages for trade shows, and say we'll have a trade show stage set. And maybe the stages there are imported, contacted, rejected, and converted, right? But then maybe we'll have a set of stages for an email list we bought, okay? And maybe that is not responded, responded, a whole different set of stages. So you can set up sets of stages. And so I know that can be somewhat confusing when you look at that language. But if we go into the live system, we can see stages and stage sets. And you can see we've got a bunch of stages set up for working. And we've got some stages set up for converted. And we have some set up for rejected. And you can see here we have sets of stages that we've disabled. But then one for qualify, it's still enabled. And we've put like all of them in here. So when you're working with leads that belong to the qualify stage set, you can pick any and all of these, stages along the way. Those will be available to you. Okay, so when you specify that you're using the qualify stage set, all of these stages are a possibility for you to choose from. All right, now let's go look at how this looks to the user. Okay, if I go look at a lead record, okay, and you can see my stage category. Remember, our category is one of three things. Okay, I'm filtered right now on my category. If I go and edit this, okay, we can see that we're using the stage set qualify, and I can't pick anything else because the others are inactive. And then these are all the stages that are available to me. So I could specify that I just finished my second phone call. That could be my stage. Now, what you don't see here is converted and rejected stages, right? So where are those? Okay, those just can't be picked, okay, because converted and rejected, that has other implications. That means the record's been archived and other records have been created, or the record's been archived and it's no longer active. So you can't just pick one of those in a drop-down. Okay, I'm going to pick that new stage and save. So if I want to tap into the converted or the rejected stages, I actually have to convert or reject this record. So when I click reject, okay, now I get to pick from my rejected stages. And I can put in a note if I want to, right? And then I click reject. Or I can pick converted, or convert, sorry. And here you'll see, I just happen to pick a good one, it's tapping into my duplication settings. is saying, hey, there's already a test company owned by Ted Salesnet. I can either pick to use that one and create a new contact, or I can specify to create a whole new company and create a new contact. Okay, anyway, at the point where I do that, when I'm in my conversion screen, now I can pick from my converted stages. Okay, so the functionality here is a little spread out. So you just have to keep in mind that the stage is a way for the user to reflect kind of the status of the lead, but they can only pick from working stages. Other than that, they have to make a decision and convert it or reject it, okay, to tap into the conversion or rejection settings. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so let's continue on down the list here. So that stage sets, hopefully that was made a little more clear to you. And the other thing that you'll see here, you'll see usage. So when you set up, when you have that stage set in place, okay, you've got to share it. You've got to say who can use it, right? So always remember, set your usage. And those of you in brand new accounts, you're going to have this general stage set up with just a handful of stages in it, okay? So it's a very simplified environment, so hopefully it'll be easy for you to get off the ground with it. These screens just show you how to add a new stage. You give it a name, you specify which category it goes in, you specify whether it's active or inactive, and you can go ahead and make it available in the stage sets that are available to you. Adding a lead stage set, we can add that new set if we want, and then we'll get to pick from a list of available stages at that point. So it needs to be made active, and then we need to share it. You know, we need to set the usage on these. Okay. Now, lead conversion. This is our first topic here that is dedicated to the conversion piece of it. So when you set up fields in the lead area, okay, if you're wanting to capture, let's say, D&B number, all right, and you want to be able to leverage that D&B number in the account record when it's converted, you also have to set up a D&B field in the account area. Okay, well, in order to transfer that data, you've got to map them to each other because the system doesn't understand, you know, that those are essentially, you know, the same field. Okay, so you do have to set up, if you're going to capture data in the lead area and you want to have it available to you in the account contact opportunity area, you have to set the field up over on that side as well, and then you have to map them. Okay, and so it's a pretty easy exercise. If we go look at field mapping, you can see we have a number of them mapped already. I'm just going to, and I can remove the mapping. Let's say here I pick, and this is just custom fields. Built-in fields are already mapped, and you see a link here. It gives you this little static screenshot of all the mappings, okay, so that you can see how the built-in fields are pre-mapped. Okay, but here I can say, okay, I want to map the test field from the lead area, and I want to map it to a company field. Okay, when I pick that, and I pick Add Mapping, it adds a row, and then I specify what field I want to map it to on the company side. Okay, and I can map either to a contact field. Oh, sorry, let's see, let's try to pick one. Oh, it says it only can be mapped once. I'm sorry, I keep adding the same thing. So let's pick location type. Okay, and I am just picking random fields, okay. Typically, it makes more sense if the fields are named the same, obviously. And the thing to keep in mind is they have to be of the same data type, they have to be the same length, and if it's a pick list field, it has to have the same pick list values in order for the mapping to work. If a field doesn't map directly to the field on the other side, the system will append it into the notes box so that you don't totally lose it. At least you'll be able to see it, and then you can handle it, you know, after the fact and set your configuration. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We just give you a little slide deck, a little of the built-in field mappings here. And then let's talk about the duplication. Okay, so on conversion, okay, many times you might have multiple individuals from the same company. So if you're converting, you don't want to create duplicate account records. So you can specify, how the matching should occur. So in this case, we're saying, okay, look at just the company name to suggest to me, okay, if there's a match. For contact, we've said just look at the email field, okay, to specify if there's a match or not, okay. If a duplicate is found, you get that little picker that pops up, and it says, do you want to use this account? Do you want to use this contact? Do you want to, or just create a brand new one? So the user always does have the option to create brand new records. Okay, so they can look at the data and decide that, no, I don't want to leverage, the account that's already there. I actually do want to create a second one. Okay.
Then can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
On this, what happens if, say, it picks the contact, okay, but it's not associated with that? Say he was associated with like ConocoPhillips and now he's with BP, and it pulls up the contact. Is there any way to reassign that contact to the company?
Not in that conversion screen. No,
So it would just add a new one.
Yeah, you would have to add a new one and then take care of it like after the fact. What you would really want to do, what the person would really want to do is if they saw that situation, they would want to go move that contact over to the appropriate account record if it was already there, and then go through it. Or,
okay,
like you said, create a new one and then swap it out. You just don't get all the options there. Yeah.
But you could create a new one and just go merge them in the contacts, right?
Exactly. Yep. You could merge the two records together right after that. So that's an
okay.
option.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay. So this is our duplication checking. Then we have this lead conversion, and this section is what it refers to as the required opportunity. I'm sorry, company, contact, and ownership. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So we can actually let the users choose on conversion who they want the owners to be of the new records, or we can actually somewhat hard-code it and say, no, we always want it to be a single user, or we can say, we always want it to go to one of these 5 users, and the system will actually round robin it. Okay, so if we lock that down and we say, you know what, whenever anything's converted, I just want the system to randomly assign them to one of these people. In today's world, I really don't see that being that frequent that people want it random. Okay, but that is an option, okay, for an even distribution. Okay, but typically what we have is people allow users to choose the owner for the company contact, and then we allow the users to choose the owner of the opportunity. Okay. Then we have required opportunity field values. That's our next slide. And, there are a number of things required about an opportunity record. Basically, you have to, specify the name, and we can build the name. You have to designate what process the opportunity is going to use. And then you have to designate 3 dates. Okay, there are 3 dates that are very important to the opportunity section. Okay, there's the start date, okay, which is probably the least important of the 3. Okay, but that's basically, we typically say that's the day of conversion. Then we have the finish date. And the finish date is always important to the opportunity records if you're going to use forecasting. Okay, that's what Salesnet looks at to give you what you might call a 90-day forecast. It looks at all the finish dates and it says, okay, these 10 are finishing in June. Okay, so we've got $50,000 potentially coming in. The finish date on these is set for July, so there's $70,000 predicted for July. So the finish date is core to the built-in forecasting, in Salesnet. It expects that the finish date is when the user is designating that that business is going to close or that you're going to win the business. Now, when you first create an opportunity, you're really not sure usually, right? You still have to go through the qualify steps and do all that good stuff. But we have to have a date. And as the person goes further through the process, they can modify it from there. So they can go, oh, no, that project's delayed or they lost their budget, and they can push that date out. Okay, but we have to set a date. And then we have first step due date. And the first step due date is tied into, the red, yellow, green on the opportunity tab. It's like, when are you going to take your next step? Okay, so that first step due date is that first date. So after conversion, what date are you going to be following up or doing something additional with this opportunity? And then we have probability. Okay, probability is built into, each step in the process as well. So these components have to be filled in. This is required data for an opportunity record, and we let you specify default settings so that the user doesn't have to kind of overthink this piece. You can go ahead and default it to some standard things, and they can just approve it and go on about their business, or you can make it, read-only, and they just have to accept it and create the record. Okay? So let's look at it. So you can see here we have them all set up.
Lynn, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. The way ours is working, like, not through the leads, but it's through the opportunity. It pushes out the finish date for a whole year. Is there any way to modify that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That can be modified in a number of places. So if it's not from the conversion piece, on the create opportunity. So here's something for you to go research. When you create an opportunity, you have to pick a layout. If you go and look at that layout, I bet the default value for your finish date is plus 365. And if it's not in that layout, right, if it's not in that layout, it might actually even be in the finish date field definition, okay. Field management. So go check that out.
Okay, thank you.
So then the next thing is what we mentioned about activities and notes. So if somebody puts notes in or they attach docs, put appointments on a lead, then when we convert, we want to retain all that history, on the conversion, so we can designate where it goes. And I would say 90% of the time we attach stuff to the opportunity, okay, because that's where we're going to be working day in and day out, is in that opportunity record. All right, so let's look at, okay, before we look at Q, I want to go through a conversion and point out to you, where all these little pieces are showing up, from the user's point of view. Okay, so I think I picked test. We kind of looked at it a second ago. But when I right-click, I can do convert or reject. I could also launch the record and click the buttons from there. But I'm going to click convert. Okay, and the first thing I get, okay, is that little matching screen. You probably need to review this with your users. But basically, this block, it found a matching company. Okay, but it did not find a matching person. So I can choose to use this company record and create a new contact, or I can choose to create a brand new company and a brand new contact. Okay, those are my two choices. Okay, I'm going to choose to create 2 new records because I want to go all the way through this. Okay, so I'm going to click next. But that's your matching. Okay, that leveraged your matching settings. Okay. Now, my convert lead screen, this basically becomes just kind of a review and confirm kind of screen. Okay, it tells me it's going to create all 3 records. I can choose a specific converted value for stage if you're tracking it to that detail. I can change the owners if I want to. I can say, Ted's going to own the contact, O1's going to own the company, and somebody else is going to own the opportunity. Okay, I can do that if I want because I've left that open for the users to do it. I'm not allowing them to change where the notes go. So notes are going to go, into each record, and my activity is going to go on the opportunity. I'm not letting people change that. Then here, okay, so that was from the activity notes setting. Then here, these are all those default values we talked about. We have to have a process. We have to have a start date, a finish date, probability, a name. So you can see here we defaulted the name to a certain format and the user can't change it. Here we suggested that it should be the sales process, but we're not letting them, but we're letting them change that if they want to. So it can be either a fill-in or it can be a read-only kind of field. Okay, so these are all those settings that you set to define the fields for the opportunity record. And now I just say save. Okay, so I'm going to save it. That test record came out of my working list. You see I'm filtered on working. If I go and look at converted ones, here's my test from today. Okay, converted with the value of account setup for the stage. So it's a converted stage, okay, but I selected a custom, stage that we had set up. Now if I go look at companies, okay, I can sort by, I'm going to look at the created on date, and I'm going to sort by that, and then I'm going to look at all companies. And so that's going to push my test to the top here. I think that looks weird to me. There we go. Sorry, I think there was a filter already in play. So here's my test record that got created on June 2014. Okay, so it created an account. If I go open the account record, okay, if I had mapped data, it would show here, and I forgot to go in and map anything, but that would have leveraged my mapping. The contact record's created and it's linked, and the opportunity record is created and it's linked in as well. Okay, so all those little specific things you set up, okay, that affects that whole conversion process for the user. Okay. Now, so let's look at the queue real quick. So what's the lead queue? We talked about that being, like an owner, but it's not a Salesnet user. It's kind of this holding tank. And so the one thing I want to show you from the user perspective when we look at a queue, I'm sorry, I'm in the company tab. If I go to the lead tab, I can filter by leads of queue, and then I can pick the queue I want to look at. Okay, and let me clear my filtering. We'll see if I have any actually. My new lead. Here we go. So I have a queue called new lead, okay, and it has 3 records in it. The thing I want to show you is that when you're queried by leads of queue, you get to leverage some mass updating. So I can highlight multiple records. I'm basically holding down my control key or my shift key, and you see how it's going dark gray. When I right-click on that, I get my standard merge option, but I can also mass delete or change the ownership here. So I can mass assign these records over to user 01 if I want to. Okay, I can mass reject. So if I say, oh, these 5 are bad, I can just reject both of them at the same time. Okay, so that's important. If you're going to set up a queue that somebody's going to manage, they've got some mass management capabilities there. But the key is that those options won't be enabled unless you're queried by the leads of queue. Okay, then finally, if we just go look at queue management, it's pretty easy. Okay, we've set up all these queues. If we go and edit one, okay, you can designate what people can do with the records in that queue. Can they add one to it? Can they delete from it? And then you've got an option up here for type. It can either be regular or limited exposure. Regular queue just means anybody who has access to that queue can go look at that queue. Limited exposure means if I say 10 people can have access to that queue, I could say to show them 5 records at a time. So if I don't want my inside sales team to cherry pick my trade show queue, I can expose them, 10 records at a time, and they just go in and they get the 10 they get. And they call it, they convert it or reject it, and then they get another one put in. Okay, and the system will manage that for you. Okay, so that's probably the main thing about, queue management, is that you can use this limited exposure option. Right, and then you'll also see you can bulk delete. So if you import a bunch of records into this queue or get them in there somehow, you can always clear that queue out. Okay, that's a pretty powerful option, so you want to be careful with that one. All right, so let's flip through the deck here. It's going to finish out talking about the queue. It explains to you the difference between regular and limited exposure. Okay, and then it also shows you we can have overrides for every queue. So all those settings about specifying ownership on conversion, and when you convert and you set default values for opportunities, you can override those for each queue and have different settings. Okay, so one queue you might want to point to a different sales process. All right, so you get some further customization options here. And then this talks about the bulk options, about bulk deleting. The retagging goes with the limited exposure concept. And then don't forget to grant access, okay? Set up your members, okay? And then we have import. And we're really, we're not going to cover import until the 3rd session, but you'll notice, this is getting, displayed in each menu. You can launch into the import wizard, from each one of your data areas, okay? And then our tips, you can customize your stages, okay? You can set up different sets of stages for different purposes, trade show versus email versus web leads. If you build your CDFs, you want to be sure that you build them on the other side and map them for conversion, okay? And then you want to set up those required opportunity fields because that can be a little troublesome for the users. Okay, I kind of wrapped that up.